Vaishnava Etiquette, and got a few things to go through, but I'm hopeful we will manage it. Just one logistical point. Starting Monday is Bhakti Vaibhava, in-depth study of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto up to sixth canto. So those who already have Bhakti Shastri, if you do it, you can get the certificate, diploma, the qualification for Bhakti Vaibhava. If you just follow our course. Those of you who haven't done Bhakti Shastri, I would very strongly recommend that you do it, because it is really very valuable. I mean, extremely valuable, actually. Yeah. But even if you haven't got Bhakti Shastri, you can sit in on the classes, and, if nothing else, it'll be a very good preparation for the future, for actually doing Bhakti Vaibhava. And I mean, it'll be very, very interesting too. I mean, it's really interesting, actually. Okay, so here we go. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshtarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So yes, these are all different aspects of sadhana. And, in a certain sense, they're not exactly directly related with Vaishnava etiquette. I mean, in a broader sense, of course, the way of life of a Vaishnava, how to progress in Krishna consciousness. Obviously, these points are very essential, not just relevant. But anyway, let's go through maybe a little briefly, seeing we have to go through about 10 of them or something. Actually, how many do we have to go through? Oops, let's see. Nine of them. So let us start. First subjects, it's big C, associating with devotees. We've already addressed this in one way or another, here and there, but Hare Krishna, we've got your association. Just see, Krishna sent you. We're going to discuss associating with devotees. So let's, anyway, let's go through this. In the manual, one must associate with devotees regularly, which means as often as one possibly can in one's given situation. The more you associate with sincere devotees, the faster you progress. Satsang does not mean that the devotees simply gather together physically. What is done in that association is important. The basis for satsang, Sankirtan, Krishna Katha, Seva, Prajalpa should be avoided. One should humble oneself in satsang to submissively hear, and one should not be eager to simply speak. Hearing comes first. And Srila Prabhupada made the point, I'm sure you've all heard it before, that whenever he was in the company of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, which was not very often, but whenever he was, he would just sit and hear. And when Srila Prabhupada was being put forward, his name was being put forward for receiving initiation, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, yes, I have marked him. He listens nicely. Yeah. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta really appreciated that in Prabhupada. And of course, in the list of the 9 devotional processes, first is hearing. Yes. Before you can chant, you have to hear, otherwise you won't have anything to chant. E, association with devotees, is our most prized possession, without which our life becomes dry and meaningless. You remember we read last night, Haridas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya asked Haridas Thakur, what is just the worst thing, the most painful thing? And you remember what Haridas Thakur said, except for separation from the devotees, I know of no painful thing. Yes, one is sure to drift from Krishna consciousness if one does not regularly associate, and I just want to read you from one of Srila Prabhupada's purports. If I can locate it. Srila Prabhupada. Yes, here it is. This is from the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam 4.9.11. Note it down. 4.9.11. So Dhruva Maharaj is speaking, and Prabhupada says the significant point in Dhruva Maharaj's statement is that he wanted the association of pure devotees. Transcendental devotional service cannot be complete and cannot be relishable without the association of devotees. We have therefore established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And this is the particular point. Anyone who's trying to be aloof from this Krishna Consciousness Society and yet engage in Krishna consciousness is living in a great hallucination, for this is not possible. From the statement by Dhruva Maharaj, it is clear that unless one is associated with devotees, his devotional service does not mature. It does not become distinct from material activities. Anyway, you think about that. It doesn't, your attempts at Krishna consciousness will not become distinct from material activities. It'll remain sort of a mixture of Krishna conscious and non-Krishna conscious, and it will not, go beyond that. So association may be in person, vapu, physical presence of the Guru and the Vaishnavas, or in words, vani, the instruction of the Guru and the Vaishnavas. Both are important. Satsang will be meaningful when one tries sincerely to practice in one's life what one has carefully heard. And one should accept a counselor who can be a friend and a guide. And, this manual's from Chopati. That's a real Chopati point. But I agree with it very strongly. And therefore, at least amongst my own disciples, we have a system of counselors. Yeah. And devotees who are being counseled, a number of them have contacted me and said that this is just really nice, really helpful. So next point, D, avoiding non-devotees. Inasmuch as satsang is required for maintaining a vibrant spiritual life, avoiding asatsang, association of non-devotees, is equally important. Yeah, so we should minimize our association with non-devotees, and particularly we should minimize in the sense of not hearing from the non-devotees what they think about life. What we should do, what people should do in their lives. Yeah, so one should associate with non-devotees only to the barest minimum extent for fulfilling professional business duties or basic social obligations. Yeah, could be relatives, etc. Lord Chaitanya taught Sanatana Goswami that the sum and substance of a devotee's behavior is that he stays aloof from unholy association. And devotees, I want to give you the verse because he's referring to a specific verse. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 22, verse 87. When asked, what is the behavior of a Vaishnav? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, a Vaishnav must avoid the company of an Avaishnav. Yeah. Asatsanga Tyaga. There's satsang and asatsang. Satsang literally means eternal association, and asatsang means just temporary worldly association. A Vaishnav Archa, this is the activity of a Vaishnav. And here's an interesting one, listen to this. By the way, Nityananda Prasade say, Gora Chandra Jani. Nityananda Prasade say, Vaishnavere Chini. By the mercy of Nityananda, one can know Gora Chandra. And by the mercy of Nityananda, one can recognize a Vaishnav. Excuse me. Okay. All right, let's carry on here. And there's a little note here. They say that the Bhagavatam says that By such association, one loses one's good qualities. A person is never so degraded as when they come into unholy association. So there are two kinds of unholy association. And just listen, look at this. Anyway, actually, according to Nectar of Devotion, what is actually said, this is what is actually said. Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his householder devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna, and another class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called Avaishnav, and their company should be strictly avoided. So, anyway, association with one who is too much attached to women, okay, sure. Or the opposite sex and material opulence, but, let's just take it the way Prabhupada puts it in Nectar of Devotion. So the next section, well, before we go to the next section, let me just read one other little thing. It says, what does it say? Oh yeah, okay. Anyway, in a little box there, the lower little box, Lord Chaitanya says, better to be locked in a cage filled with fire than associate with non-devotees. Well, let me just tell you what actually is said. In the Katyayani Samhita, it is stated that even if one is forced to live within a cage of iron or in the midst of a blazing fire, he should accept this position rather than live with non-devotees who are through and through against the supremacy of the Lord. Similarly, in Vishnu Rahasya, there's a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods and who are impelled by material desire. I was up in Richards Bay years ago, and we took just a little drive, just nowhere, just a very short little drive for some reason. And there was a river, and there was a sign, beware of the crocodiles. Yeah. So number E, reading. Devotees should daily read the books of Srila Prabhupada. Of course. You can begin with the smaller books. You can begin with the bigger books too. First book I read was Bhagavad Gita. Other books should be avoided. Yeah. Reading should be done in a, like a really studious way and not casually. It's a good idea to take notes. That's a fact. That's a good idea. One thing, it'll keep you awake. For another thing, you'll have a record if you extract interesting points. And if in the future, or if now, you're giving classes sometimes, you'll build up a whole stock of quotes on all sorts of subjects which you can use. So reading's necessary to improve our philosophical understanding. It strengthens our conviction, faith, and determination. It's actually reading Prabhupada's books feeds our intelligence. It's like food, prasadam, for our brains. Reading is also hearing. Yes, it's a form of hearing, because Prabhupada did not write the books. Prabhupada spoke, he chanted the books. He did not write the books. At least when he got to America, he recited, he dictated. All right, and I want to make a point here. Where are we? Here. Yes, reading. I have something interesting here. This is now from the end of the 25th chapter of Madhya Lila, Chaitanya Charitamrita. And actually they're just such beautiful verses. And at the end, Prabhupada makes an extremely strong, kind of heavy point. So let me just read the translations of 2 verses. The devotees who have a relationship with Krishna. This is chapter Madhya Lila 25, verse 278. The devotees who have a relationship with Krishna are like the swans and chakravaka birds who play in that forest of lotus flowers, which is at the lotus feet of Krishna. The buds of those lotus flowers are the pastimes of Krishna, and they are edibles for the swan-like devotees. The devotees eat the pastimes, so to speak. Lord Sri Krishna is always engaged in his transcendental pastimes. Therefore, the devotees following in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can always eat those lotus buds, for they are the pastimes of the Lord. So it's just glorifying reading Prabhupada's books, basically. And then in the following verse, 279, there's a purport which is a warning from Srila Prabhupada about, what may happen if you don't read the books sufficiently. Men become strong and stout by eating sufficient grains, but the devotee who simply eats ordinary grains but does not taste the transcendental pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna gradually becomes weak and falls down from the transcendental position. However, if one drinks but a drop of the nectar of Krishna's pastimes, his body and mind begin to bloom, and he begins to laugh, sing, and dance. That's the verse, 279. That's the verse. This is now the purport. All the devotees connected with the Krishna consciousness movement must read all the books that have been translated. The Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and others. Otherwise, after some time, they will simply eat, sleep, and fall down from their position. Thus they will miss the opportunity to attain an eternal blissful life of transcendental pleasure. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? So F is devotional service, and it's just a little bit sad. One should try to engage. One should not just try. One must engage. We should all get some service. In fact, when I joined, very shortly after, one devotee told me that Srila Prabhupada said that if you want to cause a devotee pain, take away their devotional service. So anyway, We all must get service. And I think here in Radharanath, there's not so much difficulty in getting service. So there are also different types of service. Yeah, so it's just touching on what is, I would say pretty much an obvious type of point. Let me just see if I've got any notes. Not really, because it's just too obvious. Deity worship, well, we already discussed deity worship. I imagine you remember. we did a whole thing for a whole session and maybe slightly more. But anyway, it's part of sadhana. So basically, they're talking here about deity worship at home. And they're saying it's very necessary for grihastas worship deities at home. Well, many senior devotees would sort of dispute that, particularly if you're living near, if your household is living outside, but not far from a temple. You should really first and foremost adopt the deities in your local temple as your, what's the term? Ishtadevas. As your Ishtadevas, the presiding deities of your life. But anyway, we know many devotees have deities at home. So then they go on to say, worship of Gauratai is great. Worship of Radha Krishna may also be done. Well, they're extremely liberal. At home, worship of Radha Krishna or Shilas should only be done, first of all, by twice initiated devotees who have permission. Not just like, you could worship Radha Krishna. So standard altar, Guru, Param Guru, Gauratai, Panchatattva, Radha Krishna. I mean, if you're talking about pictures at least. So, anyway, making just different points here. Just making different points about deity worship at home. And, it's particularly points we've covered. Well, there's a good point, little f. Coming to the temple is always the priority. We may put our home deities to rest for this purpose. Well, I don't know. I mean, gee whiz. I wouldn't. Deities at home shouldn't be put to rest too quickly, too easily. If you're forced to go away for a while, try and take your deities with you. If you can't, try and give them to some other devotees. If you can't, then you could put them to rest. But we should really take care of our deities. We mentioned the other day, they're like family members, like having children. And when you have children, if you're going away to Vrindavan for a couple of weeks, you can't just put your children to rest for a couple of weeks. Generally, you've got to take them with you. And if not, I don't know, leave them with the grandparents or someone like that. So then austerity. Well, it's not really explained here, but the first point I think that should be made about austerity is that, I mean, they do express it, but not in these terms. Prabhupada has given us our standard austerities, and we don't really need to do more than that. I mean, it's not impossible to do a bit more, but we shouldn't really speculate and irresponsibly create some program of austerity. So the basic austerities are, we get up early, preferably before 4, and we follow the 4 regulative principles. That's an austerity. We chant 16 rounds. Then some other things, as much as possible. And in a place like this, it's not just possible, but it's extremely easy to take only Krishna prasadam. Right. Bathing in cool water. Previously they said cold. So this is sort of relaxing a little bit. Yeah. Simple living, high thinking. So then they get into Ekadasi, and that's good. Ekadasi, Srila Prabhupada always followed Ekadasi. There was one incident where in, I think, Los Angeles, but some temple in America, a devotee put some grains in the Charanamrita on Ekadasi, and Prabhupada went to take Charanamrita, and I don't know if he actually took any or not, but one way or the other he saw the grains, and Prabhupada got on this devotee's case in capital letters. I mean, really got on the devotee's case. So, but the way, I've got a whole thing from Srila Jiva Goswami from Bhakti Sandarbha about, a strict following of Ekadasi. We don't really have time to go through it. Plus, a lot of it is just not practical for us. I was just thinking of reading it just for interest's sake. But the way Prabhupada observed Ekadasi was he fasted from grains. That's what he did. And, the usual things. He did not fast from brinjal or carrots, but he fasted from the usual things. Yeah. Rice, dal, wheats and, wheat type things. He fasted from them, and like peas, legumes, peas and beans, and sweet corn he didn't take. Yeah. So that's really important. That is really important, because if you don't do that, then, well, it's really serious, actually. It's really serious. One must try to observe complete fast on Nirjala Ekadasi. Haribol. Srila Prabhupada didn't, but if you want to, go for it. I remember, for 40 years, like I've said a few times, I did it. And on one occasion, I remember when we were collecting to build the temple, we went out for the whole day selling paintings, door to door and shop to shop and office to office, roll of paintings carrying frames. Yeah, that's pretty rigorous. So, anyway, it's nice to fast occasionally. Prabhupada often would not eat breakfast on Ekadasi, but he would basically always take lunch. And then there's Chatamasya. In the first month, no green leafy vegetables. Second month, yogurt, no yogurt. Third month, no milk. Fourth month, no urad dal. Of course, urad dal is not something that we have very much, although, we do have it a bit. Let me just see here if there's anything else I should mention. Anyway, like I said, there's this whole thing from Bhakti Sandarbha that different things one should do and not do and what will happen. Yeah. Right. All right. So, austerity. Chatamasya. I mentioned the incident with Srila Prabhupada. Do you remember that? Prabhupada, it was Chatamasya. Prabhupada was in some temple somewhere, and they didn't serve him something. I think maybe he asked for it, but they didn't serve it for lunch. And Prabhupada asked, where is it? And they said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, it's Chatamasya, and this month we are fasting from whatever it was. And Prabhupada said, do you do that? In other words, like, it's not really a big deal. So let's see now. Favorable and unfavorable principles. Yes. Well, here they do a good thing. It's nice. They quote Nectar of Devotion, verses 2 and 3. Very good. Very suitable indeed. That, first of all, what you shouldn't do, one's devotional service, because the point is what's favorable, what's unfavorable. They start with what's unfavorable. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. Over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. 3, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4, practicing the scriptural rules, actually. Practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them. Wow, hang on. Let me just refer to Nectar of Instruction. Let's just get it straight. So number 4, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. So as is translated, or as the verse says, Shadbir Bhaktir Vinashyati. Vinash. destroyed. As Krishna says, what does Krishna say? Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 8. What does Krishna say? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam. He protects the devotees, and vinashaya chaduskritam. He destroys the non-devotees. He just obliterates them, basically. So shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. It's the same term. One's devotional service becomes spoiled. Or if you look in the word for word, you'll see vinashyati is translated as is destroyed. Yeah, that, is destroyed. Okay, and then verse 3, nectar of instruction. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. 1, being enthusiastic. 2, endeavoring with confidence. 3, being patient. 4, acting according to regulative principles, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. 5, abandoning the association of non-devotees. And 6, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. That's pretty emphatic, isn't it? Undoubtedly assure the complete success. You know, we should note how Prabhupada expresses himself. Yeah, sort of the tone of voice, the way of expressing himself. You know, oftentimes you could say it's kind of very revealing. Yeah. So the next section is J, Brahmins. Anyway, yes, sadhana. Devotees who have got second Brahminical Diksha should strictly chant Gayatri Mantra. Every endeavor must be made to learn the principles and practice of deity worship. Okay? People should get second initiation either for really developing their preaching in serious ways or for developing deity worship. And last but not least is K, importance of time. Please remember, every moment of human life is very precious, so we should not waste a single moment. We should make every endeavor to see that we're engaged as much as possible in the devotional service of the Lord. The great benediction we've received should not be wasted. Yeah. Well, you know, there's something we can say, I think, about that. What now? Where is it? Importance of time. Yes. Right. This is just an interesting point. That in the beginning of chapter 18 of Nectar of Devotion, which is about devotees on the level, characteristics of devotees on the level of bhava, which Prabhupada translates as ecstatic love, bhava bhakti. So, Srila Rupa Goswami gives a verse or two which lists out 9 characteristics. And at least according to the Sanskrit, the second one is kala twam, kala meaning time, kala twam, which Prabhupada, but it's the second one, but interestingly enough, when Prabhupada translates the 9, he puts that one first. Anyway, like I said, you know, it's very unusual for Prabhupada to do something just, you know, without it being like really thought out. And Prabhupada said about his books that, what did he say? Oh, I forget exactly. But, you know, he just, every single word he chooses very carefully. That was the basic point. Every single word. In other words, he's never just rattling anything off. So it's interesting. Kala twam, which Prabhupada translates as, he's always anxious to utilize his time in the devotional service of the Lord. He does not like to be idle. He wants service always, 24 hours a day without deviation. Prabhupada puts it first. So, anyway, one way or the other, it's definitely extremely important. Time is so valuable that if you lose, well, it was actually Chanakya, Prabhupada quoted Chanakya Pandit, if you lose 1 second, you cannot get it back for all the money. Not just a lot of money, but just all the wealth. You cannot get back 1 second. So how valuable is time? It's practically the most valuable thing. Yeah. So, and Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and I'm sure Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and so on, I'm sure. But at least, you know, it's well known and recorded that Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur really used their time very carefully. This is an idea of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's daily program. He would take rest at 7:30 or 8 in the evening. Then he would get up at 10. Haribol. Yes. He would get up, light his oil lamp and write. Then at 4 in the morning, he would take rest and get up at 4:30. And when he got up, he would rise, he would wash his hands and face, just wash his hands and face, and chant japa till 7:30. Till 7. At 7 he'd write letters, at 7:30 he'd read. At 8:30 in the morning, he'd receive guests or continue reading. From 9:30 to 9:45, he'd take rest. Interesting. 9:45, he would take his morning bath. Anyway, around 9:45. And his breakfast, which according to the records that we have, was half a quart of milk, I think is half a liter of milk. It's half a quart. Anyway, you can look it up. Yamaraj Prabhu. 2 chapatis and some fruit. Then around 10 he'd go to court. He would shave his head monthly. So court would go from 10 till 1. At 1 he'd come home and bathe and refresh. At 2, what does it say?
473 milliliters.
Okay, 473 milliliters, half a quart, quite a bit of milk. 2 o'clock he'd go back to the court, and 5 o'clock he would translate just different things from Sanskrit to Bengali or whatever. Then he would take his evening bath and take his main meal, rice, sabji, couple of chapatis, and another, it says, half quart of milk. That's what they say. Anyway, I think you get the idea. It was quite a program he had. Not wasting any time. And Prabhupada, once in the presence of, when George Harrison was visiting him in Bhaktivedanta Manor, then somehow the subject of sleeping came up. And George Harrison said, yeah, well, Mahatma Gandhi and Napoleon, they didn't really sleep much at all. And Prabhupada said, yes, Gandhi, he would be traveling so much, he would sleep sitting in the train. And Napoleon would sleep while riding on his horse, going from one battlefield to another. They say. Anyway, I don't know. But then, so yeah, anyway, George Harrison made some point like that. And Prabhupada said, yes, I often, or I usually take rest after lunch around 2, just for a little while. And when I do, when I lie down, I think, here I am, wasting my time again. Prabhupada was not into sleeping. So devotees, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vaishnava Etiquette ki jai. Let me just remind you, on Monday, oh, well, okay, there's a change of schedule. Japa will be every day at 5. And Bhakti Vaibhava will be Monday to Friday from 6 to 7:15. 6 to 7:15. Any comments or questions? Yes. Yeah, I just read that. Yeah, that coming from Prabhupada. Fast the next day. No. You don't see Prabhupada talking about Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi. And he never observed it. I asked Giriraj Maharaj, I've asked a number. Hari Sori I asked. Hari Sori Prabhu. Yes, so, it's in at least one and maybe more than one of the Puranas. I think it's Brahma Vaivarta, which, is one of the 18 Puranas, but it's not one which we study, obviously. And it's there's a description of the different Ekadasis, but it's all very much in terms of Karmakandya. And I remember when the book, or I think there's 2 books even, came out, and we were in Muldersdrift and Giriraj Maharaj was there. And, there was some interest in these books and what we should do on the different Ekadasis. But then Giriraj Maharaj himself brought it to our attention that this is, all these things are essentially Karmakandya. So best we don't follow this. Yes. Yeah. Any other comment or question? Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. I was listening to Shruti Kirti Prabhu the other day, and he was saying that Prabhupada didn't observe, these the breakfast times. He would just eat when he had breakfast.
Yeah, we never heard of those times for the first several years while Prabhupada was present on the planet. Yeah, we never heard about that. I think it was only when I'd come down here or that I heard about it. So yeah, it's not very important. I mean, it's certainly not mission critical. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
It's a question about the books, actually about translations. Would it be okay under certain circumstances to read books translated by not ISKCON, let's say by Gaudiya Math, but books by our acharyas, let's say Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books or so on, if they're not necessarily available translated by any of the...
I'd say, well, Prabhupada was not very keen on that. That's the first thing I'd say. I mean, he really wasn't very keen on that. And, there's a vast number of books by our previous acharyas which have been translated. I mean, really. Like if you look at Kushakrata Prabhu, hundreds of books. To read them all would really, really take a long time. And yeah, so that's what I'd say.
Thank you. I didn't go looking for specifically Gaudiya Math translations. I have bought some of them from Vrindavan by mistake, not really. I know that there is ISKCON version of translation available, but I ended up with Jaiva Dharma by Gaudiya Math. I think Narayana Swami's his own translation.
I would chalk it up to experience, as they say, and get ISKCON versions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just another question on books. I heard that one Maharaj from India, I think, he said that we shouldn't read, books by, our ISKCON Swamis in the day unless we've read 5 hours of Prabhupada's books. Should we?
That doesn't sound very authoritative to me. A good thing, there's no exactly hard and fast rule, but a really good idea is to not read anything else until you've read all of Srila Prabhupada's books. Yeah. And even, you know, particularly the main books like the Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, to have read them a few times. Yeah. That sounds like, anyway, Haribol. That's what I'd say.
So, Maharaj, like for instance, Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj, he has like a book on brahmacharis and things like that. We shouldn't really get into that until we've really...
I would say read Prabhupada's books first. I mean, yeah, I've looked through, I haven't read that book, but I looked through it. It's kind of helpful in many ways. Yeah. But I would read Prabhupada's books. You know, they'll give you a much stronger foundation which will help you in your brahmachari life better than reading that book without having read so much of Prabhupada's books, if you follow the idea. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, I would just like some instructions. I was given a Shaligram Shila as a gift. What do I do with it?
Until you've got second initiation, well, I would say give it back to whoever gave it to you. And later, when you get second initiation, then your spiritual master, if you really want to do that sort of worship, your spiritual master can help arrange for you to get a Shila and be properly instructed in it.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And for those of you who attended the seminar faithfully, regularly, thank you very much. It's appreciated. Jai, thank you. Haribol. Hare Krishna. It's a pleasure, Segi. Thank you for following the